I picked up my fiancée from the police station and posted bail. Turns out she was caught by having S*X with her lover in the park. When she saw me waiting by the door, it was close to midnight when the phone rang. I almost ignored it, assuming it was another scam call or a wrong number. But when I saw the caller ID, City Police Department, something cold settled in my stomach. The voice on the line was calm, rehearsed, and utterly detached. They said my fiancée, Renee, had been taken into custody for a misdemeanor. They mentioned words that didn't sound real at first: public indecency, park, multiple witnesses. I asked if they were sure about the name, but the officer confirmed her full name, date of birth, even our address. I remember sitting at the kitchen table, staring at the leftover dinner on her side of the plate, still untouched from earlier that evening. She had told me she was going out with a friend for fresh air. Now I was supposed to drive across town to post bail for the woman I planned to marry in 3 months. The drive felt longer than it was. Every red light seemed deliberate, every passing minute filled with pictures I didn't want to see. I told myself it must be a mistake, maybe a misunderstanding. Maybe she was near something that happened and got swept into it. Renee wasn't perfect, but she wasn't reckless. Not that reckless. The police station looked smaller at night, dimly lit and half asleep. A young officer led me through a short hallway to the front desk, where a clipboard waited. My name was already written under emergency contact. That detail struck me hard. She had listed me even before calling her family. While I signed papers, voices echoed from the hallway behind the reception door. One was hers. She sounded defensive, irritated, and drunk on adrenaline. The officer stepped aside for a moment, and the door opened just enough for me to see her. She looked like she'd been running barefoot, hair disheveled, cheeks flushed, the collar of her blouse misaligned. Next to her stood a man I recognized instantly. Tyler, a former coworker who once showed up at my birthday party years ago. He was buttoning his jeans while trying to explain something to the officer. That was the first punch in the gut. Not figurative, my body actually reacted like I'd been hit. Tyler, of all people, the guy who once asked if Renee had any single friends. I had laughed it off then. Now his hand brushed against her shoulder as if they'd known each other for years. They were caught in a public park. That's what the officer said when I asked. A patrol car had found them half-dressed in a parked vehicle near the playground area. Someone had complained about noises, and when officers checked, they didn't even try to hide it. He gave me the kind of look people reserve for pitiful stories they've heard too many times. I was told the bail amount, moderate but humiliating. I paid it with a credit card that suddenly felt heavier than gold. While I signed the last paper, another officer walked by with a stack of reports. His tone was casual, maybe even amused. He mentioned that the couple had been pretty cooperative after being interrupted. The phrase echoed like poison. Minutes later, they brought her out. Renee avoided my eyes the way a child avoids a shadow. She stood there shivering slightly, clutching her phone, pretending not to notice Tyler, standing a few feet away being questioned by another officer. I didn't speak. Words felt cheap, and I didn't want to share any in that place. She started to say something, but I raised a hand just to stop the sound from happening. When the officer handed me the release form, I signed without reading. I didn't want the details in my head any longer. The air outside the station was cold, sharp, and wet with drizzle. Tyler's wife showed up just then, Laura, who I'd met once during a company dinner. She looked half-crazed, shouting his name while an officer tried to calm her. Tyler tried to explain, but she lunged at him, and the sound of her voice made everyone stop. Renee froze beside me. The moment stretched endlessly. One woman screaming betrayal, another standing mute, and me in between, realizing I was part of the same plane now. When I told Renee to get in the car, she hesitated, expecting comfort or an argument. I said nothing. The silence on that ride home was unbearable. She kept fidgeting, trying to start conversations that died before they began. At a red light, I looked over and saw her staring out the window like she wished she were anywhere else. I recognized that expression. It wasn't guilt. It was panic at being caught. At the apartment, I parked but didn't get out immediately. I told her she could take her things in the morning. She tried to reach for my arm, but I stepped away. The weight of everything pressed so heavily that I felt detached from my own voice when I finally spoke. I told her the wedding was on hold indefinitely. No yelling, no anger. Just a decision that felt already made before I said it. She stood on the sidewalk while I drove off. The rain made small patterns on the windshield, distorting her figure in the mirror until it looked like a ghost dissolving under streetlights. I drove around for hours, aimless, replaying every ordinary moment that suddenly looked different. Her late gym sessions, her new perfume, the way she guarded her phone lately. All of it was there, hiding in plain sight, and I had chosen not to see. When I finally returned to the apartment, her things were still inside, makeup scattered on the counter, her jacket draped over the couch. I picked up the engagement ring box from the nightstand and opened it. The diamond looked smaller than I remembered. Around 4 a.m., my phone buzzed with a message from an unknown number. It was a video, short and shaky, clearly filmed on a phone. Flashlights, yelling, two people being escorted toward a police car. The title said, "Caught at Riverside Park." Her face appeared in one frame before she turned away. The video already had comments, laughing emojis, crude jokes, the kind of public cruelty that spreads faster than truth ever could. That was when the numbness ended. It wasn't just betrayal anymore. It was spectacle. Strangers were already talking about us before sunrise. I sat there on the edge of the bed, scrolling through comments until dawn, realizing I wasn't a victim of a private mistake, but part of something that had gone public before I even understood what happened. By morning, I deleted the video from my phone, but kept the file saved in a hidden folder. Not for revenge, at least that's what I told myself. I wanted a record, something real to remind me that this night wasn't a nightmare I'd imagined. When I looked outside at sunrise, her car was gone. She must have come back quietly while I slept. On the table by the door, she had left a handwritten note that said, "We need to talk." No apology, no explanation, just those 4 words. I folded it, put it inside the ring box, and closed the lid. The sun was barely up, but already the day felt like it had been lived twice, once with her and once without. And the second version, for the first time, felt clearer. The morning after felt wrong before I even opened my eyes. I could sense it from the vibration of my phone across the nightstand, from the sharp buzz that wouldn't stop. Every message was a reminder that something irreversible had happened. Friends, coworkers, even my boss had sent some version of the same text. "Are you okay?" Or, "Is that really her in the video?" The clip from the park had spread overnight. Someone had uploaded it to a local gossip page. Then it moved to Reddit threads and short video compilations that thrived on humiliation. It wasn't graphic, but it was clear enough. The police lights, the shouts, her face turning away too late. Tyler's name was blurred, but hers wasn't. In the background, an officer called out her full name, sealing it in digital permanence. By noon, everyone at my office had seen it. I didn't bother explaining anything. There was nothing to say that wouldn't make it worse. I requested remote work for a week, citing a family emergency. My manager's voice was hesitant but kind. People like to be generous when they think tragedy has struck, even if it's self-inflicted. When I came back home that day, the first thing I noticed was her perfume. It lingered faintly in the air like something left behind on purpose. The apartment looked too neat, as if she had tried to erase traces of herself in a hurry. But the ring box was still on the table where I left it. Beside it was a keychain I hadn't seen before, a hotel fob labeled Maplewood Suites. I sat down and scrolled through my online banking app. Several hotel charges appeared over the past month, small enough to go unnoticed individually. Maplewood, Greenleaf, Oceanside, each entry tied to weekends when she claimed she was with friends or working late shifts. When she knocked on the door later that evening, she looked exhausted but rehearsed. Her hair was done, her eyes swollen but coated with concealer. She started talking before I could say a word, spinning stories about a misunderstanding, claiming the man pressured her, that she wasn't sober, that she barely remembered anything. Her voice cracked in the right places, but not the ones that mattered. I didn't interrupt. I simply asked her why she gave my name as her husband to the arresting officers. She froze mid-sentence. It took her a second too long to form a response, and that delay told me everything. Later that night, an officer called to confirm details for a follow-up statement. He addressed me as Mr. and Mrs. Green, my last name. That was when I realized what she'd done. She'd told them we were already married. It wasn't a slip, it was deliberate. She had used my status to sign paperwork faster, to qualify for a lower bail, and to make the situation appear more stable. Now, on record, I was tied to her arrest. My signature as guarantor was already processed. The officer apologized for the confusion, but said any changes would require formal documentation, which meant my involvement was logged whether I liked it or not. I stared at the phone in silence after the call ended, unable to decide if what I felt was anger or disbelief. She hadn't just cheated. She had dragged me into her chaos, legally and publicly. When I confronted her about it, she tried to spin it as panic, that she had said husband instinctively because she didn't want to look like trash in front of the officers. The word instinctively was what broke the last piece of patience in me. It wasn't instinct. It was manipulation, practiced and precise. I asked her to leave the apartment immediately. She refused, claiming she had nowhere to go. She begged, shifting between apologies and accusations, insisting that if I abandoned her now, everyone online would assume she was guilty. I told her they didn't need my opinion. They had the video. That night, I received another message from a blocked number. This time, it was a screenshot, Tyler's HR email confirming his suspension pending internal review. Someone had sent it to me anonymously. A few minutes later, I got another message from a number labeled private. It was Tyler himself. The message read, "Keep your girl under control before she drags us both down." That line looped in my head like static. The arrogance of it made something inside me shift. For the first time since the arrest, I felt a clear sense of purpose. I wasn't going to shout or throw things. I wasn't going to argue with her again. I was going to start taking back control. The next morning, I went through our shared files, emails, photos, documents. I found receipts for hotel stays under her name, but paid with my card. I also found an email thread between her and Tyler dating back months. It started with harmless exchanges about workouts and weekend plans, but grew into suggestive messages. They had planned to meet halfway at one of those hotels 3 weeks before the park incident. When I printed the evidence, the paper trembled slightly in my hands. Not from emotion, just adrenaline. I was already past the stage of heartbreak. What replaced it was colder, slower, more deliberate. I didn't delete the messages. I wanted her to see that I had them. I left the folder on the table when she returned later to collect her things. She saw it the moment she entered. Her expression changed from defiance to something else. Fear, maybe, or recognition that her control was slipping. She tried to reach for the papers, but I stopped her with a look that made her drop her hand. I told her that if she ever tried to use my name again, I'd ensure the police knew exactly how she manipulated the record. She left quietly after that, but not before saying that everything online was already ruining her career. Her voice cracked for real then, not out of remorse, but out of panic. She begged me to make a statement denying the video's authenticity. I didn't answer. The truth didn't need a statement. By the end of that week, her employer contacted me. Apparently, they had received calls from journalists asking for comment. They wanted to verify that the woman in the viral clip was indeed engaged to me. I told them I preferred not to be involved, but the tone of their voice made it clear they already knew the answer. Days later, she sent one final text asking if I could help fix the narrative. She said if I cared at all, I'd understand how one mistake shouldn't ruin a life. I almost replied, but then my phone buzzed again, an email from a friend in the police department. He sent me her official booking file. Under marital status, it read, "Married, spouse, Colin Green." That single line summed up how far she'd gone. Even her lies had paperwork now. I stared at that document for a long time, realizing that every time I'd ignored small inconsistencies, late replies, unexplained errands, misplaced credit card charges, she'd been laying the groundwork for something bigger. Not just cheating, but rewriting our entire life on paper. That night, I didn't sleep. I just sat at my desk, rereading everything. Somewhere between the emails and the receipts, I stopped feeling pity. She had built a world of her own rules, and I'd been a name she could use to open doors. By dawn, I'd made a quiet decision. I wasn't going to call her again. I wasn't going to warn her about what I planned. The story was already public, but the truth, the whole truth, wasn't out yet. And I had no intention of letting her keep the last word. The silence didn't last long. Scandals have a way of growing roots even when you think you've buried them. A week after I decided to cut Renee off completely, I got a message from an unknown number. It was short, only a few words. "We should talk. It's about them." Attached was a screenshot of Tyler's face from the park video, cropped tightly, with the sender's name displayed below, Laura. We met in a quiet coffee shop across town, the kind of place where people whispered even when no one asked them to. She looked drained, like she hadn't slept in days, but there was something sharper beneath her exhaustion. She'd already printed screenshots of Tyler's text history, hotel receipts, and messages between him and Renee. I thought I'd seen the worst already. I hadn't. The messages didn't read like an affair. They read like a partnership. They joked about angles, lighting, and content. I didn't understand until she explained. Tyler had been running a private online group, a subscription-based Telegram channel where he and others traded explicit material. The affair wasn't just personal. It was transactional. Renee had been sending videos, some of herself, others that clearly came from my own home, and he'd been selling access to them. That realization landed harder than the betrayal itself. My privacy wasn't just violated, it was commodified. Every night I spent thinking she was next to me had been turned into digital footage for strangers. Laura looked at me like she was waiting for me to explode, but I didn't. I just sat still, trying to process what sort of person plans a secret life like that while pretending to pick wedding colors. She showed me one more message, Renee writing that she wanted to try something public next time. That was dated 2 days before the park arrest. The whole thing hadn't been spontaneous. They'd planned to record it. They just didn't plan on being caught. That night, I went through my cloud backups, shaking slightly as I typed. Sure enough, folders that should have been private were shared to an unfamiliar email. Not Tyler's name, but one linked to a payment service. I downloaded everything before locking the account. There was enough there to destroy both of them 10 times over, but that wasn't my goal. I wanted truth, not chaos. Laura and I decided to coordinate quietly. We agreed not to go public, not yet. Instead, she contacted Tyler's employer, a marketing agency with strict morality clauses. I prepared a summary for Renee's workplace, the local nonprofit that focused on community wellness. I didn't include the explicit files, only the text evidence showing that she'd used my personal information to create payment accounts. The pattern was enough. Within 2 days, things started moving fast. Tyler was suspended indefinitely. Renee was placed on leave pending investigation. The gossip pages that had been laughing at her a week ago suddenly turned serious when a journalist hinted that deeper misconduct might be involved. Renee must have guessed it came from me. She showed up at my apartment unannounced, hair tangled, voice shaking, eyes hollow from days of panic. She demanded to know what I'd told people. I didn't open the door all the way. She tried to push past me, but I blocked her. The air between us felt poisoned. She switched tactics, first pleading, then threatening, then collapsing into tears so sudden it looked performed. She said she'd lose everything if I didn't help her. I told her she already had. That night, my phone buzzed again, a message from Laura. She had filed for divorce. Her tone was cold, decisive. Tyler had admitted to everything when cornered. She'd even recorded his confession. He said Renee was the one who came up with the idea of selling videos, that she'd used it to feel powerful. He also said she wanted to stage a thrilling encounter for the channel, which turned into the park incident. The next morning, my email exploded. Someone had leaked a company-wide memo from Renee's office announcing her suspension. People started sharing it anonymously online. Her name began trending again, this time attached to words like blackmail and explicit leaks. The internet doesn't care about nuance. Once you're a headline, you stop being human. A day later, I received a voicemail from her father. He sounded broken. He asked if what people were saying was true. His tone wasn't angry, just tired. I didn't know what to tell him, so I said only that everything he'd heard came from her actions, not mine. He hung up without another word. By evening, Renee had sent me a string of voice notes. In one, she begged me to delete everything. In another, she swore she'd fix things, that we could start over somewhere else. In the last, her tone shifted. She accused me of ruining her life to look righteous. She said she'd been pushed into this by Tyler's manipulation, that I'd abandoned her when she needed me most. Each message grew louder until the words blurred into static. I didn't reply. I forwarded the recordings to her father and to the HR department handling her case. After that, the messages stopped for 2 days. Then the internet found her again. Screenshots from her channel surfaced online. Someone had hacked or sold them. The comments were vicious. People posted her name, job, city, everything. The once untouchable social persona she'd crafted collapsed overnight. When I woke up the next morning, there were reporters outside her building. News vans. Microphones. She had become a morning segment, the kind that anchors discuss with half smiles before cutting to commercial. In the middle of it all, Laura called me one last time. She said Tyler had moved out and was living with a relative. She sounded calm, almost serene. She thanked me for handling everything quietly, for not turning it into revenge. I told her it wasn't about revenge. It was about making sure people saw the truth clearly for once. Later that day, I came home to find a package on my doorstep. Inside was the engagement ring. No note, no message. Just the ring, scratched and slightly bent, probably from being thrown into a box in panic. I placed it beside the folder of evidence and stared at them both. Symbols of 2 different versions of the same person, the one I thought I knew and the one I'd helped expose. That night, I went for a walk. The city looked cleaner than it had in weeks, like the air itself had reset. When I passed the park where she'd been arrested, yellow tape still fluttered across a section of the fence. A maintenance worker was scraping graffiti off a bench. I didn't stop. I just kept walking until the sound of traffic drowned everything else out. By the time I got home, my phone was vibrating nonstop again. Friends sent links to articles, memes, reaction threads. Every click made the story spread further. The digital tide had turned fully against her. Still, part of me wondered if it would have been easier to let it fade quietly, to delete everything and pretend it never happened. But then I remembered that night at the police station, her face hidden behind her coat, Tyler standing inches away from her. That image had burned too deep to forget. As I sat by the window, the city lights reflecting off the glass, I realized something unexpected. I wasn't angry anymore. The fury had burned itself out, leaving something quieter, the strange relief of knowing I'd finally seen everything for what it was. The next step wasn't about revenge or vindication. It was about closure. But for that to happen, The last thread still tying us together had to be cut in public view. Renee thought she'd lost everything already. She had no idea how much lower the fall could go, and I was about to watch her reach it. The official fallout started on a Monday morning. The kind of morning that pretends to be calm, but hums with tension underneath. I woke up to an email from a journalist requesting a statement about the recent misconduct case involving your fiancé. The word fiancé felt foreign now, like it belonged to someone else's language. I deleted the message without responding, but it didn't stop there. By midday, 3 more journalists had called. Some wanted confirmation, others wanted a quote. One even offered to pay for insight. I didn't answer any of them. I didn't need to. By that afternoon, the entire story had evolved on its own. A leaked HR letter from Renee's workplace spread across news sites. It confirmed her termination, citing ethical violations and misuse of personal data. The phrasing was surgical, cold, final. When I checked the live comment sections, it was a feeding frenzy. Strangers tore apart every piece of her life, her photos, her job, even her volunteer work. People loved watching a public fall, especially one wrapped in hypocrisy. The woman who'd once lectured about community values was now a trending hashtag for betrayal. That evening, a letter arrived at my door. Not an email, not a text, a handwritten envelope addressed to me in her father's shaky handwriting. Inside was a single sentence. She's lost everything. I hope that brings you peace. It didn't. Peace was never the point. 3 days later, the story took a new turn. Tyler's wife, Laura, filed a civil suit for damages. In the filing, she included evidence of the Telegram channel and listed both Tyler and Renee as co-conspirators in distributing private material without consent. It was brutal and precise. Every line of the report felt like an iron gate slamming shut. I read it twice, stunned by how quickly she moved. Tyler's company issued a statement the same day, confirming his termination. Within hours, his social media disappeared entirely. But the real shock came from him, not Laura. He released his own written confession through his lawyer. He admitted the affair, the channel, and even said that Renee had orchestrated the park incident herself. According to him, she wanted a rush, a little danger, something to make their channel stand out. Reading that was like seeing her face again for the first time, stripped of every illusion. She hadn't been drunk, or desperate, or manipulated. She'd been chasing attention, the way some people chase air. A few days later, I received another call from the police. They were investigating whether she'd used my identity to open online payment accounts. The officer was polite, professional, but there was a faint tone of disbelief in his voice, as if even he couldn't imagine how far she'd gone. They asked for verification documents, and I provided everything I had. That evening, she came to see me one last time. Not at the apartment, but outside my workplace. She was thinner, pale, wearing sunglasses even though it was cloudy. The guards had already called me to ask if they should escort her out, but I went down anyway. Part of me wanted to see the ending with my own eyes. When I stepped outside, she was standing near the parking lot, clutching a folder to her chest. She started speaking the moment she saw me, words spilling out too fast to follow. She said she'd lost her apartment, her job, even her friends. She said Tyler had betrayed her and left her to take the blame. She said she had no one. The folder she carried contained court notices, printed articles, and a letter from her employer confirming the termination. She wanted me to read them, maybe to pity her. I didn't. She asked if I'd ever loved her. The question hung in the air between us, but I didn't answer. Love wasn't even the right word anymore. It was like asking if I missed a storm. Before she left, she said something strange, that if she went down, she'd make sure Tyler paid for everything too. I didn't know what she meant until later. The next morning, footage surfaced online from outside the courthouse. She'd attacked Tyler after a preliminary hearing, throwing a folder at him, screaming about lies and betrayal. The security guards restrained her while cameras flashed. The video spread faster than the first scandal. It was everywhere. Headlines, talk shows, podcasts dissecting the Park Girls' meltdown. By evening, she was in custody again. This time, for assault and contempt of court. I didn't post bail. No one did. I heard from Laura again the next day. Her voice carried a kind of quiet victory that didn't sound cruel, only certain. She said Tyler had agreed to a plea deal and would likely face probation. She also mentioned that Renee's attempt to countersue had failed within hours. No one believed her story anymore. The court filings showed she'd fabricated statements, forged names, and tried to shift blame through half-truths. The world had finally caught up to her lies. A month later, I received official notice that my name had been removed from her case record as her spouse. It was a formality, but it felt like lifting a weight from my chest. I signed it and mailed it back without ceremony. In the weeks that followed, my life began to regain shape. My company offered me a promotion, apparently, They'd admired how I handled public stress. I accepted it without hesitation. I moved to a smaller apartment closer to work, threw away everything that reminded me of her, and sold the engagement ring to cover legal fees. Every now and then, I get a message from someone asking if the story online was real. I never confirmed or denied. People didn't need the truth, they needed something to talk about. One evening, while clearing old files, I found the folder that started it all. The printed emails, the hotel receipts, the screenshots. I considered burning them, but didn't. I packed them in a box and left it in storage. Not as a reminder of pain, but as proof that silence can be more powerful than revenge. Weeks passed before I heard her name again. A news alert popped up on my phone one morning. Local woman sentenced to 6 months probation for assault and misuse of private data. The article was short, detached, clinical. It mentioned her name once, then moved on to other stories. The world had already forgotten. I didn't feel triumphant. There was no victory in any of it, only inevitability. She had built her own collapse piece by piece, and I'd only stepped aside to let gravity do its work. That night, I drove past the courthouse where it had all ended. The steps were empty, the lights dim. I parked for a moment, listening to the rain tapping against the windshield, the same kind of rain that had fallen the night I picked her up from jail. Back then, I'd thought the worst thing that could happen was discovering who she really was. But the real nightmare had been pretending for so long that I didn't already know. When the light turned green, I pulled away, feeling the last of it slip off my shoulders. No forgiveness, no hatred, just quiet, clean distance. People like her chase chaos because peace terrifies them. For me, peace was the only thing left worth keeping.